asked how you are.
How are you, Bonnie? How is that?
That should be appropriate. The oddness.
Why your joyous strains prolong? What the gladsome tidings be?
You said David's not there.
Which inspire your heavenly song. Come to Bethlehem and see Him whose birth the angels see. Come adore on bended knee Christ the Lord, the newborn King.
I drive to your house and then will you drive? You said yes.
In excelsis Deo,
It worked out Sometimes I choose not to go just because I don't want to drive.
in excelsis Deo.
The only problem I have with the Metro, I love it, but a lot of its times are inconvenient if you're not commuting for work.
Yeah.
They don't. It's not like New York where you can get a train, or Chicago you can get a train anywhere in 20 minutes. You have to wait an hour or two sometime to be able to get where you're going on the Metro.
They did.
Yes.
Patty, will you give a basket update? I forgot to put the pictures on the slides. I'll show them next week.
The 20 of their Rancho Cucamonga Family Resource is having a food truck, and we participated with the Thanksgiving. And so a couple weeks ago, we put together 20 baskets here with food items, gift cards. There was a listing, and we took them to the resource center, and Carrie there I had a lot of food items and was able to put together 125 baskets.
Just 125?
125,
Okay.
yeah. But she needed about 5 items. So our church, we went and did a lot of shopping, a lot of stores, but we got 125 cookie mix and frosting and sprinkles and hot cocoa and mushrooms. Anyway, so we got that over to them, and then Friday and yesterday they were open to the public regularly. They had 205 people signed up for food for the drive, and so tomorrow I'll touch base with them tomorrow and see if through the public they got all the so they have 205 baskets with 205 people. If they don't, I'm sure we'll help them
We'll feed,
finish
yeah.
that off. Yeah, so it's been really fun, our church helping them put together these baskets. And it's really, they're doing a good job.
Because last year we just found out about it too late to do much, and so we sent them a check, but that isn't really.
I mean, if anything, I would have loved to have been there and helped, but I babysit my grandkids and which I have to do today. I have to leave at 12. I saw somebody pull up.
It's David.
Oh,
Right.
right.
For sure.
And the potato passes back to me. We love that. Wait, were you let people
Why, yes. My child throws everything everywhere.
I got down on the floor to find one of the rings that they were looking for. And all of a sudden I feel this weight on my back. I look
Did he
up,
climb right on top?
I'm
Yeah.
like, hi, Noah. I said, I can't see where his head is, so watch his head. Did you? Uh-huh. It was
I was like, no, I saw it after you left. He's good, but he's not quite done. Like the baby step. Well, one's been missing for a while. So I don't know what happened. That is my child. My mom says it's my fault. So, like, you earned this when you were a kid. So,
So she cursed you with the same thing? May you have a child exactly like yourself. Hi, David Wright. How are you?
okay, this is your 6-minute warning, everyone.
Hey now, let's not start swinging sticks around. That would be bad. Hey, I thought I was the only one you called him up. Now I'm jealous. You know who else you can say?
When are you actually going? What day are you going? 23rd?
Is it too late for me to get on that? I gotta check to see, because now that things change, I really want to go. It's really short notice. I would be taking.
Text Michael and see where the seats are. Or do you have seats here? Okay.
I'll ask. No, it's
It'll be a late evening. Okay.
no, as far as I know. Oh, that's right. So direction might
I keep realizing I'm not on the camera. Sitting over there in the corner. I'm like,
So, because, like, that would be 3 direct shows. That's kind of awesome. To work for my birthday. And in the app like this, because you could have
I'm sadly close one. It disappeared from the website. But honestly, most of the places that close like that, all of nothing's been moving in there, so they could decide next year, like, oh hey, we'll take it back. set it to be 3
So, have you guys worked out carpool and all that yet? Okay. Well, we'll see if I can figure out a way to swing it around. Because that's more fun in the holiday season, and why not, right? It's what I
Okay, Bonnie, I'm going to switch the
said to my
audio over so you're not going
is
to
that I've been
hear
spending
us
too much money this
for a
year.
little bit until I
But-
get started.
Sometimes you need to. So sometimes it's self-care to do things like go out to dinner. Sean, let's go back over. Is that what you're saying? What can you try to matchmaker?
It doesn't show me exactly what it's doing all the time. There we go. Good morning, everyone. I think everyone can see online, hopefully, with the live stream. And we're good here. Well, it is the third Sunday in Advent already, which is a little crazy. I'm not quite ready for Christmas. It's sooner than I wish, but that's kind of been this year. Things have like everything feels like it's going slow, and then all of a sudden it's going fast, and then the rhythm of the year is off. So we did hope and peace so far, and we'll get to joy today, which the whole series is about joy, which is kind of fun. But this is our special Sunday just about joy. Hi, everybody on the interwebs. Nice for you to join us. If it's live, great. If you're watching this on Tuesday, great. I do have a couple announcements I'm going to do at the beginning because I'll forget to do them at the end. So, as is our tradition, on the longest night of the year, we are doing a night of hope. It's just going to be on Zoom / YouTube / Facebook instead of gathering here. It's On the longest end of the year, we look for that light in the darkness. Christmas is not always the easiest time for us. Many of us have lost people, and Christmas can be difficult. My grandfather passed away like a week before Christmas, and so every year it's like always a little difficult for our family. And I pretty much do the exact same thing every year for Night of Hope, but it's different because of what we're going through. I have found that it's one of the more meaningful services we do every year. Even if it's on Zoom, we can still be together. I think that'll be the easiest way for everyone who wants to be there, and because it's the work week, it's just easier. But Christmas Eve, our candlelight will be here and on Zoom / Facebook / YouTube. We'll do it hybrid. We're going to do it at 5. It is a Friday for Christmas Eve. So if you are not off work, I'm sorry. But 5 o'clock is the best time for all the kids to be able to do it from home. Because I know my child after 6 o'clock is not going to sit still for anything. So I don't know about the other kids, but I imagine it's somewhere. It'll be available shortly thereafter on YouTube for playback. So if you can't join us live at 5, watch it with your family whenever you can. Even if it's Christmas morning, it's still the story lived out. It may not be dark where you are, but that's okay. So those are the things that I have forgotten to tell you the date. I mean, Christmas Eve is Christmas Eve. It's the same day every year, so we don't have to worry about remembering what day it is, hopefully. But 5 p.m. here, 4 online. You have options. I've been talking fast because I'm trying to remember all the things and not lose track. But let us take a moment to enter back into that Advent posture, if you will, the waiting for what will be, and anticipating when peace, hope, joy, and love are realized for everyone.
Come, thou long expected Jesus, born to set thy people free from our fears and sins. Release us, let us find our rest in thee. Israel's strength and consolation, hope of all the earth thou art, dear desire of every nation, joy of every longing heart. Born thy people to deliver, born a child and yet a king, born to reign in us forever. Now thy gracious kingdom bring, by thine own eternal Spirit rule in all our hearts alone. By thine own Shining star, come and guide us. Shining star, come and guide our hearts. Shining star, come and guide our hearts. Shining star, come and guide our hearts.
So last week we did a little earlier than we normally would the story of the Magi. Not when they arrive, but when they begin their journey. They follow the shining star long before we hear of their arrival. We don't really know exactly how long their journey was, but they saw something and knew that it was calling them to come and be curious. That hope and expectation of this season of the awaited Messiah for the people thousands of years ago, and for us, the hope of what can be. We light the first candle. The thing for which we long so often this time of year is peace. I think especially over the last 2 years, almost now, of things changing every day, peace has felt far away. And so we light the second candle for the peace we know is promised to us. The third candle is a different color. It's pink. And everyone always thinks it's about love, because love and pink go together for us as our tradition. But it's actually the candle of joy. We often think of Mary and the joy that she experienced when finding out she was going to bear a child. But there is joy in the promises that generations before awaited Jesus' birth. Where we find joy is something we'll get to in just a moment, I think. But we light the third candle celebrating the joy of this season, even when it doesn't feel like it's near.
Shining star, come and guide us. Shining star, come and guide our hearts. Shining star, come and guide our hearts. Shining star, come and guide our hearts. Come and guide our hearts.
This week we have another reading from the prophets as we look at these texts which tell us of the expectation of this season. From Isaiah 55. All of you who are thirsty, come to the water. Whoever has no money, come. Buy food and eat, without money at no cost. Buy wine and milk. Why spend money for what isn't food, and your earnings for what doesn't satisfy? Listen carefully to me and eat what is good, Enjoy the richest of feasts. Listen and come to me. Listen and you will live. I will make an everlasting covenant with you, my faithful loyalty to David. Look, I made him a witness to the peoples, a prince and commander of peoples. Look, you will call a nation you don't know. A nation you don't know will run to you because of the Lord your God, the Holy One of Israel who has glorified you. Seek the Lord when he can still be found. Call him while he is yet near. Let the wicked abandon their ways and the sinful their schemes. Let them return to the Lord, so that he may have mercy on them, to our God, because he is generous with forgiveness. My plans aren't your plans, nor are your ways my ways, says the Lord. Just as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my plans than your plans. Just as the rain and the snow come down from the sky and don't return there without watering the earth, making it conceive and yield plants and providing seed to the sower and food to the eater, so is my word that comes from my mouth. It does not return to me empty. Instead, it does what I want and accomplishes what I intend. Yes, you will go out with celebration, and you will be brought back in peace. Even the mountains and the hills will burst into song before you. All the trees of the field will clap their hands. In place of the thorns from the cypresses will grow. In place of the nettle, the myrtle will grow. This will attest to the Lord's stature, an enduring reminder that won't be removed. So I need to give you a little background on this part of Isaiah. It's not written by the prophet Isaiah that we know and talk about so often. Chapters 40 through 55, and then there's 56 and 57 that were added later, are part of what we know in the academic tradition and call often Second Isaiah. These words come from a prophet who was in the exile with the people after they had been removed and were occupied. Isaiah stayed behind, I think, as far as I can remember. I get the details mixed up between 1st and 2nd Isaiah. But what we know is that these words were understood as being part of what Isaiah had spoke of in the earlier chapters that we see. And so the texts were put together because they were part of one story. They talk about the Messiah in the same way. There is the mention of the covenant, the new promise. And these words are the very end of what was the original part of the second half of Isaiah. So these words are not just a summary, but a celebration of all that has been proclaimed from God. In that we find a source of joy, I think. But what's interesting most to me, so the majority of the Hebrew text that we have, what we call the Old Testament often, was from a time when there wasn't currency in the way that we would understand now, or even in the time of Jesus, with the Roman Empire, where there were coins that had Caesar's image. That wasn't the way of God's people. They just shared and were abundant with one another. But things had become scarce by this point, in some ways. They were exiled from their land. They weren't able to provide and have community and even identity because who they were was so rooted in place. They were the people of the promised land, and then they weren't in the promised land anymore. So the abundance that they had known was different. Now, they were still provided for. God told them, as we talked about last week, 3 weeks ago, I don't remember. The idea that they should take root where they were, that even though they were exiled and occupied, that not to think of that time as just temporary, that wherever they were, they should take root. So this idea and imagery comes out in these words of a feast, of abundance. And the comparison to David is part because of the promise that was given to David that had been a long time. I mean, David was long dead by this point. And so people might have forgotten about that promise or just started to think that that promise was never going to happen. It was never going to be fulfilled. But God says, I haven't forgotten. The thing which I promised long ago will come to pass. And then there are ideas of what that promise might look like. But I think there's also maybe not quite a warning, but a strong recommendation from God to not think of these promises being fulfilled in the way that the people expect. We see that in Jesus' life, that the kind of king that he was wasn't the kind of king they were hoping for so often. But when God says, my plans aren't your plans, nor are my ways, nor are your ways my ways, it says the Lord. The very framework they had for the Messiah wasn't necessarily what God intended. God tries to paint a picture through the prophet of what joy can be found in this promise. That God's grace, God's love, that will be realized in the Word. I mean, there's lots of speaking of the Word, and that comes into John's Gospel, which we'll be spending some time with in the coming year. Jesus was understood to be the Word made flesh. And so when the Word does the work of God, there's a anticipation of the joy that will be found in the Christ child. That in God's abundant love, which love is the candle for next week, yes, but in these promises being not only given but fulfilled, joy is found. I promised a few weeks ago when we ended our series on revolutionary love, looking at Valerie Kaur's book, See No Stranger, that her epilogue of joy was something we'd come back to. So here we are. It is Joy Week. It's been woven into this whole series, I think, for us, this Advent grouping of 4 weeks. But when we looked at all of the practices of revolutionary love, she reminds us that joy is at the core of what sustains everything else. I didn't put this on the slides like I meant to, but she writes, joy is the gift of love. Grief is the price of love. Anger protects that which is love. And when we think we have reached our limit, wonder is the act that returns us to love. She goes on to say, in the face of horrors visited upon our world daily, in the struggle to protect our loved ones, choosing to let joy in is a revolutionary act. In joy, we see even darkness with new eyes. Joy returns us to everything that is good and beautiful and worth fighting for. So for us, that joy found in the promise of what God would bring is what we anticipate during this Advent season. As I've said a couple times already during this year, Advent isn't some passive season of just sitting and waiting. It's an active thing. We have to create peace. We have to instill hope in others. And as Valerie writes, we have to choose to let joy in. Even when we are surrounded by things that aren't exactly joyful. She uses the imagery of the part of her story when she lost a close friend who was like a mother to her. Of that ending of life, finding joy in the celebration of what had been, was the very moment that she discovered that she was pregnant. So she uses the imagery of birth throughout the book, of the labor of giving birth. And she writes that she didn't realize how much dying is like giving birth. The breathing, the pushing through pain, and anticipating what might be on the other side, though it is the complete opposite. It's very much similar. She writes that joy is possible even amid great labors. The labor of dying, the labor of birthing, and the labors between. Letting in joy, therefore, is the 10th practice of revolutionary love. Joy is the gift of love, and it makes the labor an end in itself. I believe laboring in joy is the meaning of life. We see from the words in our text from Isaiah today, not just joy for the people. That joy that God brings about through all that God is goes beyond the people into creation. So these promises aren't just for us. We shouldn't be so short-sighted. They are for everything. The rain and the snow come down from the sky. The mountains and hills burst into song with the joy of God. I think that's maybe why it's a different color on our candles. It's at the core of what there is. Love is that for us, but beyond that, what comes from love is that joy. We have understood in our weeks leading up to this that love is something that takes a lot of work. Not just in our own lives, but in our country and world. But joy in what is birthed out of that is a place in which we can root ourselves. When things seem chaotic or dark or the complete opposite of joy, we can return to that place still. Finding joy in what we know has been and what we hope will be, because of the promises that we see. Joy isn't easy, always. That's why we do a night of hope, because sometimes that joy is even more elusive than we hoped it would be this time of year. But it's there. Hope and peace and joy, and we'll even add love, even though we're not there yet in our preparation for Christmas. They are the things which we often lose sight of, I think. When we do work of justice, inclusion, and family, the work can overwhelm us. Those are our understandings of how we do the work of revolutionary love as a people called Sacred Place. And so I invite you during the next, how many days till Christmas? 11? No, 13. It's 2 weeks from yesterday, right? In the next 13 days of Advent, before we start the 12 days of Christmas, there's way too much math this time of year. I invite you to begin with joy. It's not where we start with this whole journey when we talk about it, but root yourself there. Find the joyful things in your life, even amidst the things that aren't. And while you consider and contemplate that, I have a song for you.
Joy to the world, the Lord is come. Let earth receive her King. Let every heart prepare Him room. Heaven and nature sing, and heaven and nature sing, and heaven and nature sing. Joy to the earth, the Savior reigns. Let men their songs employ, while fields and floods, rocks, hills and plains repeat the sounding joy, repeat the sounding joy, repeat, repeat the sounding joy. He rules the world with truth and grace, and makes the nations prove the glories of His righteousness, and wonders of His love, and wonders of His love, and wonders, wonders of His love. And wonders, wonders of His love.
We live in this strange tension during Advent of Jesus was born 2,000 years ago, but we still await the birth of Jesus. So doing a song like Joy of the World is a little bit of that tension for us of celebrating the birth of Jesus before we actually get there in the story. But the joy found in that birth is the same joy in that anticipation, that promise of joy, if you will. In the coming days and weeks, we will continue this journey. We turn away from the texts of the prophets to, well, I guess another prophet, John, who anticipates more immediately the birth of the promised one. So as you continue your preparations for Christmas, whatever that looks like for you, lots of shopping and wrapping and things like that, probably. Winding down some work so you can actually get some time off, maybe. Whatever that is for you, find moments to celebrate joy. That might be a moment of quiet for you. Looking at introverted people out there, especially. Or that might be something that's more celebratory, like baking cookies with your family. Whatever that might be for you. Be intentional about doing it. Make sure you create time for it. Because this season can overrun us if we let it. May you, wherever you are, find that joy this week and the week after and going on from there. We should do everything with joy. That's why I named the series that. The work of creating sacred places here and wherever we are should be done with joy. And may you remember that as you go out and do that joy finding, you can always come back here because this is your sacred place.